Hello, everybody, and welcome to Madden and Benz Unfiltered. It might be the 12 days of Christmas. It's the 11 days of football with 3 games. Can the Steelers manage to win at least one of them? We're going to talk about that coming up with the Chiefs on Christmas Day at Acrisure Stadium. Tim Benz, Mark Madden on Madden Benz Unfiltered, brought to you by Bella Construction. With 27 years of experience, they specialize in roofing, siding, windows, and doors. Their large purchasing power means unbeatable prices and top quality. For a free estimate, call 724-515-5163 or visit mybellaRoof.com. Bella Construction, where quality and affordability meet. Mark, you called it the death stretch. These 3 games in 11 days for the Pittsburgh Steelers. Are they going to die all 3 times, or do they manage to gut up and get one against KC on Christmas?
I don't know. That game has such a haphazard feel to it because it's the 3rd game in 11 days. That means there's going to be more carryover injuries, more injuries occurring during the game. I think with so much football in a short time span, the play will be sloppy. So I think the game will have a random kind of feel to it and perhaps a random kind of result.
I wouldn't be surprised if the Steelers win because this is the kind of game that they tend to win. When everybody gives up on them, they always gut up and get one late. It's how they turned things around last year and got in when they put Mason Rudolph in as the starting quarterback. But I wouldn't confuse managing to win against the Chiefs to, kind of blur the lines between that potential result and who they are. And who they are is a team that probably peaked way early. And whether or not they get a division championship, I don't think it means that they belong with KC in the playoffs or Buffalo for that matter.
No, I quite agree with that. And I think the last 2 games are a harbinger because the scores flattered to deceive against Philadelphia and Baltimore, Tim. I thought the margin of play favored the victor much more than the actual scoreline did. I thought the Steelers were physically manhandled. I thought the way those games looked went way against the Steelers' brand. So I don't know if they come into the game against Kansas City demoralized because of all that. Maybe they're too dumb to know how bad those games were and how terrible they looked. But I just don't have a feel for this game at all. Again, it goes back to the 3 games in 11 days. There's so much about this game that just strikes me as tough to get a beat on.
Yeah, I was just talking to a guy from Kansas City that I know that covers that team, and I was asking him, how do the Steelers win if they win? And he said, well, the problems along the offensive line, particularly against the opposing team's outside pass rush, are real. So the Steelers theoretically have an outside pass rush. Okay, so is this a game then that perhaps the Chiefs say, we've had Isaiah Pacheco back for a few weeks now, maybe this is finally his game after what Derrick Henry did to the Steelers for Baltimore? That would make a lot of sense to me if I'm Kansas City.
Yeah, and
don't expose Mahomes and his injured ankle to the Steelers' pass rush too, by the way.
I got to give John Harbaugh, who's not, necessarily coached well against the Steelers in the past, for choosing Henry, just accepting the fact that the Steelers were always going to go with Jackson on the option and just saying, okay, we're going to give it to Henry almost exclusively between the tackles and let him beat you up. And Tim, people deride Harbaugh as a coach, say he always gets out-coached by Tomlin. I think when the Steelers and Ravens meet and it goes bad for Baltimore, it's mostly Harbaugh out-coaching himself. But that little wrinkle with Harbaugh just sticking with Henry and abandoning some of the Lamar things because the Steelers had it pegged, that's the kind of adjustment, the kind of wrinkle Tomlin never comes up with. He's supposed to be this brilliant coach, but all the Steelers do on a given day is show up and play like the Steelers. There's no adjusting. There's nothing according to what the opponent does very rarely. They play like the Steelers. Neither that's good enough or it's not.
Well, where they outcoached the Steelers this time is finally waking up and smelling the coffee and realizing that's what the Steelers were doing to beat Lamar and beat them over and over again. And the failure to adjust came in game because the Steelers knew what the Ravens constantly were ignoring, which is exactly what you outlined. They were just stubborn about making sure Lamar still had the option to keep it himself when I think over the years, if they just given it to Gus Edwards or J.K. Dobbins and not
Right.
leaned into Lamar having to potentially keep the ball as often as he did, well, then maybe the other backs could have done some of what Derrick Henry did. Maybe not to the degree what Derrick Henry did, but some of what Derrick Henry did. Maybe not 162 and what was it, Mark? Again, 6 rushes over 10 yards, but something akin to that. And the Steelers just never had the counterpunch.
Well, they never do. When's the last time Tomlin made an in-game adjustment we're talking about afterwards? Like I said, to repeat, the Steelers show up and play like the Steelers, and that's either good enough or it is not. Now, Tim, I'm not trying to make John Harbaugh into Andy Reid or even Jim Harbaugh. It took the dumb bastard 10 games to figure out what the Steelers were doing.
Oh, yeah, I'm not trying to bestow praise too much on him. I think the Ravens have a lot of the same flaws that the Steelers do, whether it's coaching, whether it's shortcomings roster-wise. It's part of the reason why they're always exactly where the Steelers are. It's always why these two teams.
Yeah, but I'll give you an example, Tim, of the coaching superiority. And again, this took 10 games too, by coincidence. The Ravens secondary was awful for 10 games. So Harbaugh moved Kyle Hamilton from the slot to safety, more traditional role for him. He took over in center field, the communication, the stability, and it's made that secondary much better. Tell me what about the Steelers right now is better than it was at season's beginning, because I can't come up with nothing.
No, they're fading in December, much like they did last year when they got to 7-7 and they had to turn to Rudolph late to turn things around.
Well, like 18, 19, and 20. Right now, this feels like another late season Tomlin collapse. Honestly, Tim, the last 7 seasons, this being the 8th, they all feel the same.
Well, part of that is
feels the same.
And there's a reason for that. And the reason is when they play in September and the defense is fresh and flying around and no one's back, it's not just the guys who are hurt. It's the guys who are playing that are banged up that have 14 weeks of football wear and tear in their bodies, and the defense just doesn't collectively move like it used to. We kept hearing over and over again that part of the reason why the Steelers were 10-3 was the defense had more team speed. It was the fastest version of the Steelers defense that we've seen in a long time. That erodes as time goes on. And you're seeing more evidence of that every year. And again, this season, where the Steelers defense just can't make the plays that it used to. And now they're getting beaten up front too.
Well, they're getting beaten up, period. Like I said, the Steelers were badly out physical these last couple games. I think Patrick Queen's been an awful signing. I think he makes X amount of plays, but no more than somebody in his position would be expected. And he's soft. He's a finessey linebacker. I'd rather have a Landon Roberts than him any day. And the notion that they complement each other, I don't think Queen does nearly enough.
All right, Mark, let's move over to the offensive side for a second. We talked a lot about the defense, but offensively, you made the point of the podcast that despite Russell Wilson's huge mistakes, those mistakes aside, I know everybody's focusing on those, that the Steelers wouldn't have won this game anyway. And I think there's some degree of truth to that. But we do have to point out the 2 mistakes he made because they were incredibly costly.
Oh, no question. Those 2 mistakes lost the game. I'm not sure that they win if he doesn't make them, but we'll never know. I think the key mistake was the fumble. I think if he just slides, which you got to do, the people saying, well, he's trying to make a play, you got to respect that. No. You got to be smart. You got to slide there. You got to give yourself first and goal at the 4. If he slides and they score that game, that's the best chance for that game turning out differently.
Plus, it's the NFL. If he slides, it's not going to be first and goal from the 4. It's going to be first and goal from the 2 because it would have been half the distance because for sure he would have picked up a penalty after he slid.
Yeah, that's just a dumb play by a smart quarterback.
And it wasn't a very good throw either on the pick 6. And you talked about the adjustment that Baltimore made. The other half of that adjustment was Humphrey more in the slot, and there he was on, wasn't it Pruitt that he was trying to throw the ball to? Actually, I thought Brady on the broadcast was worse than he was the week before. I thought he was a little bit better than he had been in other games in the first Steeler broadcast against the Eagles. I thought he had regressed some in the second broadcast that we saw against Baltimore, but he did make a good point on that throw from Russell Wilson, where the ball was, where the receiver was. What were you going to get on that play anyway?
I don't listen to the broadcast at all. I turn the sound down and blast music. Or I'm going to watch party where you can't hear the broadcasting anyway. So I don't know. I mean, Brady, he's just a talking head to me with no words coming out of his mouth when I watch the game. But I love how the local yokels, Tim, my so-called colleagues, our so-called colleagues in the business, one of them said it was the worst interception Russ has ever thrown. And I respond on Twitter, yeah, except for that one at the goal line that lost the Super Bowl. I think that might have been worse.
Nothing's ever happened outside of the vacuum of Pittsburgh Steelers football, Mark. There have actually been no Super Bowls aside from the ones the Steelers were in.
Well, Tim, today is the 52nd anniversary of the Immaculate Reception.
That's true, yes.
And to celebrate, I went outside in front of my house, and I bounced the ball off the sidewalk and pretended I caught it.
You know, what's funny is I was just thinking about this. 2 years ago, didn't they play that game on Christmas Eve, right? The anniversary game. And we're all saying, why did they play it on Friday, the 23rd? Because it makes perfect sense to do it. They've always wanted to put a game on a Friday. Now they're putting Christmas games on a freaking Wednesday. That's where we are right now with this.
Well, that's the big problem I have, Tim, with this game on Wednesday, is that it's on Wednesday. I don't care about Christmas Day.
Mm-hmm.
I'm just not inclined in that regard. But it's on a Wednesday, and it's not safe. It's 3 games in 11 days. That's what bothers me about when the game is. But the players let it happen. I also think it's incredibly petty of the NFL to intrude on the NBA's long-standing Christmas Day tradition.
Do you really think that, or are you just being facetious?
No, I really do think that.
Yeah, I don't care about the NBA, and frankly, more and more.
I don't either. I haven't watched the NBA game on Christmas ever, but I recognize pettiness when I see it.
How about next year or in coming years, how they should handle the college football playoff and the NFL being on at the same time? Because they're always going to put games on the Saturday, whatever it is, the 20th, 21st, whatever, the Saturday before Christmas. They're always going to put games there. Always. They always have. There have always been NFL Saturday games there.
The reason they always put games then was because the college football bowl season hadn't started yet. But now with the playoff, like Tony Kornheiser said, you can say that college is intruding on a traditional pro date.
Yes, you can. I mean, I think they should be smart about it. It's not just the NFL versus college. There's gambling involved where people gamble more on the NFL. There's fantasy football involved. I think people care a lot more about Lamar Jackson than they do.
Yeah, but most fantasy football leagues are over by now.
No, they're not. They go to the second to last week.
And not the big money league, Tim. Not the Pittsburgh Steak. Whoop, can't say that name. Not the defunct Southside Restaurant League.
Well, most leagues usually go up to the second to last week. So it's semifinal week, it's final week. So people really are more into it. There are very few college football fantasy leagues. But at any rate, I just don't think it's a winning battle for the college football playoff. And if I'm the networks, I try to figure out a way with both sides to open up things so I get maximum viewership and streaming too, for that matter.
I don't know how you do it, Tim. I don't know when you put those games otherwise.
Well, do you have to have the bowl games on the traditional dates if nothing else is traditional anymore with college football?
I don't know. I just hate the playoffs, so I would rather not have it.
I'd rather they go to 8 teams and just make it quarterfinals on down. I think they exposed themselves in the very first year with every potential flaw that could happen for the playoff. And that's a little bit of bad luck that it went this way for the college football playoff. But everything that was bubbling as to why you're seeing the problems that you're seeing were inherently there when they came up with the format that they did.
Not least because Penn State is the 6th seed and they're getting a bye to the semifinals.
And the byes, how they exist, the conference champions and the way that they treat them, even though they're minimizing the impact of playing in conference play, everything with the college football playoff that's a walking contradiction has managed to manifest in the very first season.
Yeah, but they don't care. They don't care. I mean, the way to do it, Tim, as I wrote in the Trib a number of weeks ago, take the top 44 programs, make 4 conferences of 11 teams done geographically. You play every team in your conference once. That gives you room for a couple non-conference games. The top 2 in each conference go to the playoffs, quarterfinals on down. You don't worry about Boise State. You don't worry about the Group of Five. You don't worry about the SEC and Big Ten getting do-overs because they're so powerful. You just have a standard exact system like every pro league does. Like in the NFL, Tim, you're not going to hear people saying, well, Tampa Bay is no good. They shouldn't be in the playoffs. If Burrow hadn't been hurt, if Burrow's good, he deserves to be in the playoffs. Put Cincinnati in instead. No, in the NFL, there's an exact method of making it. That's what every sport needs.
Yeah, there's math involved, and you can complain about, Team X could have or should have made a run in the postseason, but it's just hypothetical, and everybody knows the rules going in. Nobody really knows the rules going here. The only thing I just don't want, and it's pissed me off all weekend, is I don't want to turn this into a cry fest for Alabama. I don't want to turn this into a swan song for Alabama. They lost 3 times. They lost to a couple 500 teams. Like, the way I was hearing it positioned was like Alabama had the right to lose twice. What were you going to do? Have them replace 2 teams? Like, make up your mind. Which one did you want to see out for Alabama? Yeah, people are complaining about Clemson because they won the conference and got in. Which one is the sob story that we're going to match up with Alabama here?
Well, and I don't like that people say Indiana shouldn't have been in it. That started as soon as they lost Friday night. Meanwhile, Indiana had the closest margin of defeat.
Yes, it turned out, right.
First-round games. It's not Indiana's fault that the Big Ten, like most of the conferences now, it's too big. What a conference has to have, to be fair, is that every team plays the same schedule. And these conferences are too big, so that can't possibly happen.
Right.
And they don't want to divide into divisions and then have the playoff, because that way you couldn't have Ohio State and Michigan in the Big Ten final and have them in the same division and play their game every year. They want to have their cake and eat it too. And the result is I just don't care.
Mark, before we get some comments here, what about the Penguins? They played a really exciting game, a back-and-forth game, a ping-pong game against Nashville. Now, granted, that's a bad team. They played a much better team against New Jersey and lost and barely generated any shots. But, I guess it goes back to the points you made on the podcast. They did a fair amount of right things, too, to keep that game close while generating no offense in the process.
I thought they played okay against New Jersey, except for the lack of shots. And, Tim, they had a couple really good looks, like Sid missed an empty net, that could have made a difference in that game. So I don't have much of a complaint with the way they played at New Jersey. I do think, though, that they got to beat Philadelphia tonight. If they beat Philadelphia tonight and go into Christmas having won 9 of 13, they still maintain X amount of legitimate momentum. I think if they lose tonight and go into Christmas having lost 2 straight to divisional foes, that momentum definitely dissipates.
Yeah, for sure. Oh, you know what we didn't talk about too, football-wise, Mark, is Kenny Pickett got in Philadelphia. I don't know if you saw that, if you noticed that at all.
Yeah, he put up a Kenny Pickett stat line.
It was like 14 of 24 for 140-something.
Yeah,
like
he lost.
Yeah, and he hurt his ribs, too. He came right, and somehow they still put up 30-something points. Saquon had a big day. But, he comes right in for Hurts. He polishes off a touchdown drive, finds A.J. Brown, touchdown. And then from there, it was lean on Saquon, and he got hurt in the process. I don't know where they're going to go from here, how badly hurt Hurts really is. I don't even know how badly hurt Pickett really is. I think the next guy there is Tanner McKee. But he got in. Mason Rudolph had a start. He threw 2 touchdowns and had 3 interceptions. One was just a Hail Mary at the end of the game. And Connor had a huge day for Arizona, and then he got hurt, too.
Yeah, Tim, my strategy, my hype was a week late. I wanted the Steelers to hurt Hurts, then pick Pickett. And then that's exactly what happened yesterday.
Yeah, although we do have to say this. I don't know if you saw the play at the end. He threw a perfect pass to Devontae Smith, and he just dropped it. I mean, flat out dropped it. Otherwise, that ices the game, and they win. But
I've always been told, Tim, that Kenny Pickett puts an odd spin on the ball. I blame it on him.
All right, let's get to a couple comments here. Mutated Genome on YouTube says, "Fool's Gold." That was the headline for the Madden Monday podcast. And I think there's a degree of truth to that, because I think when they started off really hot with Justin Fields, they got 3 games against teams that might be playoff teams: Atlanta, the Broncos, and the Chargers. Cousins wasn't ready to be back yet. He won some games and then faltered late, but he was not ready to be back from his Achilles in week 1. Bo Nix was just in his second game as a rookie starter, and Herbert was dealing with an ankle injury. And they managed to win all games that against those opponents with suppressed scores, to be kind. And that's how they got off to the 3-0 start. And since then, they've been what, Mark? 7-5.
Yeah, and 7-5 is more accurate to the type of team they have.
Right. If they end up losing these last two, then they're a 500 team over the last 14 weeks, and there you go.
Let me ask you this, Tim. Let's say they lose to Kansas City and beat Cincinnati and then lose their first playoff game. They will have lost 4 of their last 5, correct?
Mm-hmm.
Will they change anything?
Not coaching-wise, no.
Will they change anything?
Will they keep Russ? I think that's the biggest question.
Will they keep Omar?
Yeah, they'll keep Omar.
So the point is, now or next year, it'll always be the same. These seasons are all alike, and they don't care.
See, I think, Mark, the more interesting question is not so much what you outlined there, losing their first playoff game. That just continues the same thing. What if they do manage to go to Houston and win that playoff game? Should we treat anything like it's all that different?
Yeah, because they will have won a playoff game.
I don't know. I mean, I guess you're right, but backing in, having lost 4 or 5 or whatever it is, and then going and beating a mediocre division champ from the AFC South doesn't make me want to have a parade down Grant Street.
Well, here's the other thing too, Tim. Will they be any better next year with TJ Watt a year older, with Cam Hayward a year older, with Russell Wilson a year older? I mean, I don't think so.
If they keep Russ.
I think they'll keep Russ no matter what. I think they're so firmly stuck in the mushy middle and nobody sees it.
And they have a ton of holes to fill. They got to fix things along the defensive line. They got to fix things at wide receiver. We'll see if they keep Pickens or move Pickens and try to get 2 guys.
That is the biggest example of the roster mismanagement is that they traded Deontay Johnson without a plan B and still haven't replaced him. That is unforgivable and has been very costly for their season.
Eric says, how many 95-yard scoring drives is this elite defense going to give up this year? Yeah, exactly. It wasn't even so much the Russell Wilson fumble as it was compounded by the fact you got the 4 and then just let them walk down the field. Mark, they barely – I don't know when they got to 10 third downs because it never felt like they got to third down even. Like Watt pointed out in postgame, I guess I didn't realize it along the way, they didn't have a 3 and out. Like, if they don't get a turnover – they don't get 3 and outs. They don't get the other team off the field.
Wait a minute. Baltimore didn't have a 3 and out.
No.
That's incredible.
Yeah, they rarely got to third down. So I know they got to 10, but for the amount of time they were on the field, and, you do have to keep in mind that they had the picks.
Tim, that is the way the Steelers are, rather the way they're treated, okay? Tomlin is a great coach just because. They have a great organization just because. The defense is elite just because. The facts don't matter. It's just because.
Matthew says, will George Pickens be on a snap count this week? No, I don't think so. He better not be. If he was on a snap count, then he should have been on a snap count this past week if they're going to try to half-ass it through.
They're going to give him what he wants to, Tim. They will retain him.
By the way, did you take anything away from what Mike Tomlin said yesterday at the press conference, Mark, when somebody asked him, are you surprised that George Pickens' injury took this long to heal? And he said, yes. Like, what is that? Really? What does that tell you?
I don't know that it tells me anything.
That they missed.
Tomlin implying that Pickens could have played and didn't want to. I don't know.
No. I was actually going a different way. That they miscalculated it when they tried to put him out there to see if he was going to play on that Sunday morning, or if they tried to put him out there on that Friday in advance of the Cleveland game.
We all know he was really suspended, Tim.
That's right. I forgot about the conspiracy theory. All right, let me get to Pete. I could see them beating the Chiefs, then losing to Cincinnati. One thing that makes me wonder about Cincinnati is whether or not they're eliminated. And by the way, all 3 teams that were on the periphery of the AFC playoff picture, they're all still alive. They all still won. That includes Cincinnati. What if they're eliminated by then, Mark, but they're still trying to get Chase that triple crown for the wide receiver championship, like what Cooper Kupp had? They still keep everybody playing?
Don't they go to sign Chase?
Yeah.
So I'm not sure they want to run up his numbers.
Well, they're up already. I mean, if he's on the fringe of getting a triple crown or he gets a triple crown, whatever, he's worth the dollars.
Yeah, then I think they do keep everybody in there.
Richard says the Steelers are simply the best of the average, above average teams. When they have to play one of the good elite teams, they get exposed. I don't even know if you could give them that crown. I mean, like, does that go to Baltimore? Or does that go to Minnesota?
I think Baltimore's an elite team.
Okay, what about Minnesota or Green Bay? I think those teams kind of fall in this category too, don't you?
I think they'd both beat the Steelers.
Eric says, why does
Minnesota for sure would beat the Steelers.
Why does New Jersey own the Pens in recent years? Because they're younger and faster? ?
Yeah, and they're better too. They got better players. They got better younger players.
This guy says Najee's get up a go has gone up and left. If he ever had any anyway. Warren outsnapped Najee, and I think it's easy to see why. Yeah, I think Warren played with a little bit more pop in that game against Baltimore, but
ain't neither of them any good.
I do think there's some hyper analysis that goes on. Like Najee was fine when he had 3 straight games of over 100 yards. Nobody was calling for Warren then.
And that Najee did good in limited snaps. Maybe he just needed to play less for a week.
You know what? I mean, they ran the ball for as much griping as there was about the run game and all of Arthur Smith's comments about the old pickup truck and all that. They carried the ball. The running backs did 21 times and averaged 4.5 yards per carry. Maybe they should have run the ball more and relied on Russ less.
Yeah, I was thinking about that pickup truck thing. I still have no idea what he was talking about.
I don't know how much of a compliment he thought he was giving it. I thought it kind of came out the other way.
I think he's just another dipstick in that job.
Billy says the college basketball tournament has tons of blowouts, top teams crushing lower teams. Every once in a while, you get a 16 beating a top seed with a crazy three-pointer. Blowouts will happen in all of the sports championships.
Yeah, but the football tournament ain't the basketball tournament. The basketball tournament's always been big. The basketball tournament's always tried to involve every region of the country. It's a different approach. It's always been different. To expect football to be the same is stupid.
Yeah, you know what? Like, what he just said there, the 16 beating the 1. Well, when you set it up inherently that the 16 doesn't have a chance to play the 1, you know, it's not like Boise was going to try to beat Oregon. Like that it wasn't going to happen. And they're the potential Cinderella. Oregon's the top dog, and they both didn't play the first weekend.
Well, you know what the problem is too, Tim? And again, the sports media in this country and the way they report on stuff, the way they just try to put a positive spin because of, television rights and so forth. The college football playoff is an absolute disaster so far. They've screwed it up every single way you can, and no one will put it in those terms. No one. They nitpick around the edges like maybe Indiana shouldn't have been in it. Like you said, Alabama. But they won't say this was the wrong way to do it. They need to change it dramatically. My way is the best way. I have a better idea than anybody, but they won't do it.
Calvin says, I see them losing their next 3 games. I don't rule it out. I mean, they always tend to find one of these games that they win. They nut up and they win a game like this, but it's possible for sure.
If they would lose the next 3 games and bring Tomlin back, that would be insanity. And they will.
Let me get to this guy who says it's the Tomlin win with the defense philosophy that's the problem.
Yeah, his philosophy contradicts the era, and the defense ain't that good anyway.
Well, I was just going to say it's particularly a problem because the defense isn't as good as he thinks it is, and it's not as good as it was at the start of the season.
Yeah, it's incredible. Incredible how overrated that defense is. But, Tim, if you turn on ESPN right now, as I will try to avoid doing when we're done here, they're going to be talking about the Steelers' elite defense. They are.
Brian says Penguins.
You still got to see these guys as a threat with their elite defense.
Only Carolina and San Jose ditched the boring white. I don't know what he's talking about there with the white helmets. You know what he's talking about there?
No, I don't.
All right. We'll end with this one then. All right. Nick says Liverpool, top of the league. They won like a 6-3 soccer game the other day, didn't they?
You're goddamn right, Tim. Yesterday.
There you go. Don't rely on defense with Liverpool.
Yep. Up 2-0, then 5-1, then 5-3, then a goal at the end to seal it. Just like Spurs I appreciate offensive soccer when teams open it up, Tim. But A, you can go too far with that sort of thing. And B, that's suicide against Liverpool, who are so good on the counter. But Liverpool, too, I mean, in the last 3 league games, they conceded 8 goals, which is too many.
Now, Mark, I understand that you were part of some potential team building with Liverpool management. Is that correct?
I talked with Teddy Werner, Tom Werner's son, who was in town. He's part of FSG. We mostly talk Penguins, but yeah, I basically said you better keep. We have Salah, Van Dijk, and Alexander Arnold up on contracts at season's end. So I said, well, keep them or face everybody's wrath.
What is on the campaign calendar here for Mark Madden's Christmas schedule?
Nothing. I got nothing. Well, I'm going to friends on Christmas Eve and Christmas Day. Then I'm going to New York to see the Penguins play at Queens. So, not much. I like to get it over with, Tim.
Are you doing a Christmas watch party anywhere or no?
No. That tempting.
I was wondering, I don't know how many bars are open or like if people are kind of doing the same thing in terms of business for the Christmas holiday for the Steelers.
I would think some sports bars are probably open. Or no, more likely, maybe some local bars. You know what I mean? Where people, I know a lot of local bars that open on Christmas after 6 o'clock, maybe.
Yeah, like Jack's. I always used to go to Jack's when I would anchor at Channel 4 when I would pinch hit for them sometimes back in the day. I used to go there afterwards.
Yeah, if you do open the bar on Christmas Day, you're godless and will burn in hell. But nonetheless, the Steelers are playing.
There you go. All the reason to be godless. Mark, happy holidays. Merry Christmas to you. We'll catch up next week after we figure out what the hell's going on with them in the playoffs.
And Merry Christmas to everyone out there.
All right, that's Madden and Benz Unfiltered. We're brought to you by MyBellaroof.com. Happy holidays, everybody.